Good morning, audience. Today it's episode 3 for passionate educations. My name is Mrs. Hibayez. I'm a vice principal of one of the international schools here in Saudi Arabia in Riyadh. Here from Princess Noura University in Riyadh, KSA. I'm having a fabulous one, Candice. She's a senior consultant in H2 advisory and special education needs. And we're going to focus on this because I know it's a nightmare for most of the teachers and mothers and like this. So here we have Candice. Candice, please tell us about your passionate story with special education needs.
Well, when I first started with education, there was one girl named Lean, and it didn't matter what I did, and she was trying so hard. There was something that just wasn't connecting, and so I started researching different techniques and different approaches to try to teach her information in a different way, and eventually found something that worked. But it really ignited a curiosity inside me to understand what was happening with this girl and how can I help her and how can I help other kids like her.
The one who are different.
Yes. And what I discovered is that her learning abilities were fantastic, but we had to figure out what strategies worked for her. And so it wasn't about taking standard education and trying to fit it into her brain.
Yeah.
It was trying to, looking at her brain and understanding what techniques worked best for her.
And this goes with the differentiation instructions because teachers, no one solution fits all, right? Am I right for this?
Absolutely.
So if I asked you about how long you have been in the education field?
I have been doing education for about 12 years now.
MashaAllah, 12 years.
Yes.
Okay, you give this through implementation through international schools, or what kind of channels did you give?
Well, I've worked at international schools, I've worked at universities, and I've done consultation is where my focus is right now.
So now you are consulting, right?
Yes.
Okay, and this might help us a lot, inshallah. If I asked you about your approach through H2 advisory.
Well, one of the things with H2 advisory is the assessment that we do, or the assessments, because there's more than one. So part of it is with special education needs, we have something called the 9-box model. And when people are diagnosed with something like dyslexia, they try to do it more as a one-size-fits-all, like, oh, you're dyslexic. But what we try to do is we split it into 9 different compartments or 9 boxes, so that we can have a better understanding about where specifically the struggles and the challenges are. And then, so that's part of where their challenges are. But when we look at assessing their strengths, we have a multiple intelligence psychometrics that we use, and that will help us understand where their strengths are, and so we can play to their strengths to help them with their challenge areas for their learning.
Fabulous. So you are hitting the track about the multiple intelligence as same as the differentiation instructions, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, because in my beginning journey in the education field, for myself as a teacher, I was struggling because I met these kind of students because in every class you have a heterogeneous one. It's not like the same benchmark you're having. You're having some of them above level, on level, and below level. So what kind of advices as a quick start for the teachers and even for the students themselves to discover their strength?
Well, before we even get to discovering their strength, it's more about having the right mindset for learning. And so when people are learning, it's really valuable for them to have a growth mindset. But also when you look at, where's their focus, where's their attention? So where's your physical body, but also where's your mind? And you are most effective when you're learning when your mind and body are in sync with one another. So if you're sitting in class and your mind is out in the playground, you're not going to be learning effectively. So what strategies can we do so that your mind and body are in sync? And making sure that that's happening. But also when you look at someone's emotions, there are certain emotions where you're more effective in your learning. So for example, if we look, can we turn around and look at the map for a second?
Sure.
Okay. So when we look at the map, when
Can
someone...
we first, this is the map of
Yes.
the emotional intelligence, the EQ, okay? Because most of the teachers as well, and most of the mothers and most of the educators are struggling between the IQ versus the EQ. And now we are going with the 21st century, EQ was giving that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So just give us a hint about this.
So this assesses where your emotions are at any given time. And so we have the happiness, the empathy, anger, relevance, trust, and stress. So for example, if someone is in class and maybe there's a problem at home and they're feeling uncomfortable or vulnerable because maybe they have a sick grandparent, or perhaps they're feeling bored because they're not interested in science and they're more interested in linguistics. Or maybe they had a fight with their best friend and so they're feeling frustrated because their social concerns that they're having. If they're here with a frustration, or they're here where they're distracted or bored, or they're feeling vulnerable because of some family issues, their mind isn't in the right place to learn. So when we look at the map, where if we go up on the orange line for curious and interested, belief, up in the green line, which is trust, hope, confident, love,
belief,
happiness, where it's optimistic, warm-hearted, happy, or the empathy line where they're feeling considerate, warm-hearted, or sentimental. When they're in that zone, that's where they're most effective in their learning. And so, as much as we can help, and this is for all children, not just kids with special education needs, when a child's mind is in the right, when their emotions are in the optimum learning zone, then they're more effective as well.
So you're highlighting and confirming about this is not for only special needs of education, right?
Absolutely.
It's for all.
Absolutely.
Okay, you mean like a growth mindset versus the fixed mindset?
Absolutely, yes.
Exactly.
And so that's for all kids. When it comes to kids with special education needs, we have to be more specific in where their challenges are and different strategies to help them. But a lot of the learning strategies that we use for special education needs, we also use for all children. But with special education needs, the biggest thing that I want to get across for people is that people think it's just, they flip letters when they're reading or writing.
Like dyslexia.
Like dyslexia, but that's one very small piece of a giant puzzle. So if you look at Sally Shaywitz, who's a doctor at Yale University, her research showed that 1 in 5 people have symptoms of dyslexia.
Oh
so 20%. So it's not just one kid in the classroom of 30, it's 5 kids or 6 or 7 kids in a classroom. And so it's a much broader issue, but the symptoms that a child may show isn't what people think of the standard dyslexia with letters flipping. That's just one piece, but they might have other symptoms. Like,
it's more than that.
Yes, it's a much broader picture, a much broader issue that people realize. And so there's that aspect of the awareness of what dyslexia is, but then there's the issue of what really does it mean. Like, people see it as a hindrance or a problem.
Yeah.
But in reality, it's a strength, because if you look at how a person how a person thinks, a person with dyslexia or special education needs, their mind, the big difference is a person who thinks in 2-dimensional versus a person who thinks in 3-dimensional.
Wow.
So when a person...
It has something more.
Yeah, it's actually an asset. So, for example, if someone sees in 3-dimensional, they're very talented with art. They're very talented with music and sport. They're great engineers and inventors and computer programmers because of how they see things. They can see things from all angles, and so it makes them better at certain jobs. And so it's a great strength. But it's a great strength, but you have to develop that strength. You have to nurture that strength. And a lot of times within the school system, it's not meant to develop that strength.
Exactly.
And so it's more about appreciating and valuing how strong their mind really is and how it really is an asset. If you look at the greatest athletes and the inventors and musicians and artists of any generation, they're all dyslexic.
Wow.
You know,
This is fabulous.
Albert Einstein for one, Richard Branson for another, Elon Musk as well. They all have special education needs, and that's
and most of them, I think, not most, emphasizing for 1 and 2, I think the school refused to give them the education, and they were taking homeschooling, remember, with their mothers.
Absolutely.
Because they need care, like you told me about the emotions. They need someone who cares about them, right?
Yes. And so, you know, people think it's, you know, they didn't become successful in spite of their dyslexia. They became successful because of their dyslexia. And
you're gifted.
It really is a gift, and that's why, you know, my book that's coming out is called Dyslexia: The Hidden Superpower.
Can you give us a hint about your book?
Oh, well, my book is to break down the 9-box model.
What is the name of the book again? Because we have a lot of plenty readers.
The book is called Dyslexia: The Hidden Superpower.
Dyslexia: The Hidden Superpower.
The Hidden Superpower.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Because I advise most of the teachers to read it.
It really is a strength or a power within them, and I want to. My goal is to cultivate these powers within people.
Fabulous.
So that they can reach their full potential.
You know, as an educator, I do believe that most of the students are gifted, subhanAllah, in a special way. And I think they are like a seeds. They're going to flourish with their special part or special time, and whenever they are ready, right? Am I right?
Yes.
And our part is to help them not to survive in life or I mean, lifelong learners. I mean, how to thrive, because there's a huge difference between survive and thrive. So before we close, if I asked you about giving some kind of advices and tips for the early teachers who are coming to the place of the education, I mean, for the first or second year, because they are going to face a struggle. So what kind of tips or advices you can give them to help them enjoy the learning part? Because they are creating message and they are delivering message to the students.
What I would say is to, when you find students who are struggling this way, to encourage them and embrace who they are as individuals. Oftentimes there's a misconception where, you know, especially with multiplication tables, you know, if you write it out enough times, you'll get it, and that's actually quite opposite for someone who suffers with dyscalculia. And so think outside the, you know, as an educator, think outside the box for what strategies you can employ with these students who are struggling, because what may have worked, you know, previously or how they had learned themselves isn't necessarily the best approach. And so to keep an open mind and to try different strategies.
Thank you so much, Candice.
I hope thank you very much.
Me as well. Thank you. It was a great honor to have you in this interview, and I hope that most of the teachers and as well as mothers use this kind of precious advices to bring the joy back to learning and to bring your class to life. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hope to see you again. Thank you, Candice.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.